All right, welcome everybody. So let's see. Start out with some announcements. Because Alyssa has been so uh, wonderful as to create an agenda for today. So we have open hour later today. That is in 3 hours. So figure that out for whatever time zone you're in right now, and it will also be on YouTube. Um, Big news for our particular working group. The Great Module Migration got merged. So essentially, all of those modules that were slated to exit the core have sort of been finalized, at least, in this first cut. Things can certainly move around in the future, but for now, this is going to be our North Star that we're aiming for. So that is SALT pull request 65971. So take a look at that and I guess get the final view of what things are going to look like. Um, if I get time, I might at some point just scan over that and see how well it still matches up to the issues that Gareth put in a while back for migrating things. Because we had initially taken those issues and started down the road of cutting off some of the extensions and stubbing those out and things like that. So we want to make sure that we're still doing the right thing. The last time I looked at the Great Module Migration as like sort of a snapshot, everything that has been created as an extension is still a community extension. So hopefully that's still the case, and we didn't do some work that didn't need to be done.
Related to that, I know we had a action item that was assigned to Pedro originally, a couple of like a month ago to after that merge request got, sorry, PR, I'm used to talking GitLab. After that PR got merged, Pedro was going to work with the core team to make sure that we added the stubs so that we could redirect people. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Um, I think that was a separate initiative.
Yeah, no worries. Just making sure it wasn't the same thing since you used the word stub. Wanted to make sure. I think if I recall what we talked about a month ago, we need to have a way where it will still like have a placeholder for where the old modules used to be as far as the docs are concerned, just so we can redirect them to the community maintained repo, and then we can update that as needed. So I'm going to follow up and see if any progress has been made on that. So I'll take that as an action item too.
Yeah, I'd like to see if that's still something that we want to try and aim for, because after the conversation last time while you were out, uh, centralizing the documentation as much as we can. Uh, we wanted to take that item and essentially we had Megan come up with a way that allows us to sort of have like static pointers to documentation, such as the main salt core documentation and things like that, but then also dynamically pull in extension documentation as well. So I think if we accomplish that, we could potentially just have like a, hey, you want to know about extensions, in order to view further functionality, go here and you can see, links to all of the things.
Okay. Yeah. Let's keep that as an open thing to investigate and get some resolution on. So that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, awesome.
I don't mind driving that and just at least getting information about where things are at. Yeah. So is Megan still planning on attending this working group and things like that?
I'm not certain, but she put in some PRs with the work that she had done to date.
Okay.
And if we need to run with that, we can. but I think that it sort of put the groundwork in place for us trying to come up with a good solution. And essentially, as far as like recapping kind of what that looked like, certainly check out the YouTube video. You can look on the Salt Extension playlist, I guess.
Mhm.
And we should have a number of videos there. But for the last meeting, which was, I don't know, when was that? Beginning of April,
Two
two
weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um 2 weeks before April 18th, whenever that was. Um April 4th. So when we did that, essentially the demo looked a lot like distributed documentation for all of the extensions, right? Because essentially that allows us to be um, in a situation where we're not reliant upon docs building properly in every single one of the extensions in order to build a cohesive centralized documentation. So we want to try to be opinionated on what that looks like, right? Like, hey, go live and read the docs. Maybe we'll create a framework to sort of onboard new extensions into read the docs easily. But essentially, like having that sort of external distributed documentation for all of the independent extensions. And then what we do is we have, I figured this automation could probably live in the community repository where all of the working group meeting notes live. But essentially, we would build the centralized docs there and be able to bring in static sites like the salt documentation, like as a link, like, hey, go here, this is where the core modules are. Be able to potentially discover uh core extensions, so things that are getting broken up but are still going to be managed by the core team, and have those listed out as well. And then also have all the community extensions. And essentially, we'd be linking out to the documentation for every single one of those. And Megan put a great process in place to be able to dynamically gather that information and build. So essentially, we could end up with like a nightly build process that goes out, discovers new extensions, and builds core documentation so that we just keep up to date kind of automagically. Um, and don't have to say like, okay, you made an extension, now go put in a PR over here, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to make it as easy as possible for like discoverability and things like that. The other
Yeah.
cool thing that Megan integrated after the the last meeting was like a meeting notes section. So all of the markdown that Alyssa has been awesome about creating for us for the working group meeting notes, we'll actually have that in the web page too.
Mm,
And if there's other working groups that are generating markdown as part of their meetings, we could potentially have a big like salt community centralized information repository.
that's
So
exciting.
yeah, I think that the sky's the limit, right? We can do just about anything. We're all smart technical folks, and there's a lot of great talent in this community. So it's just a matter of figuring out what we want to do, and having folks carve off time to be able to do it, which I think probably brings us to the next point. I will take a
Yeah,
breath before we
absolutely.
move on, but like, coming up with initiatives that we want to try and take on now that things are starting to firm up a little bit more. So I'll take a pause real quick, and everything regarding the great module migration, and sort of recapping what happened at the meeting last time, and kind of what the solidified direction might be. Um, any questions, comments, things like that? Oh, I also do want to bring up uh, Max's metadata repository as well. So we'll talk about that in a second before we move on to brainstorming. So anything about what we've talked about so far?
No, just I mean, for my part, you've motivated me to go watch that the YouTube of the meeting I missed because I want to kind of check out that demo. That sounds really cool. Anyone else? Welcome Shane, by the way, and welcome is it a Mark? I'm guessing. Anyway, welcome. Yeah, any other questions?
I can't
Everybody's
remember
still
when, but I think that the Great Module Migration PR was merged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It
if
was.
I
you
can't
showed
remember if that
up
was
on
before
time,
the
you'd know
last.
that we already said that, Shane.
I'm sorry. I
It's
apologize.
all good. It's all good. When did it get merged, by the way? I just was like, did it get merged? And I checked it out. I was like, oh, it did. Do you know when it got merged?
I couldn't remember if it was before our last meeting or after.
It was
Okay.
But it was
after.
within the.
Yeah.
It's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Okay. No worries. No, that's important news.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if there's no questions about anything that we've covered so far, Max, do you think that you could go over the, I guess, sample or proof of concept for kind of what a metadata structure would look like? We discussed like having a YAML file for extensions that like we put it in the repository, it would assist in building out the central documentation. So it could be one of those things that we put in the copier tool that we're using in order to create the cookie cutters of what the extensions are. And that's like all of the test framework, all of the things that are needed to sort of like drop in the module code. Copier takes care of that. Well, we could implement this concept of like a metadata file in there as well. And so when the central documentation automation finds new extensions, there are some things that it's really hard to derive what that repository is, right? Like we can certainly say like, hey, here's a repository, but we don't know where the documentation is. We don't know like what the long description of what the extension is for. So Max came up with an idea of having sort of like a metadata file, and he took a swing at creating sort of like a framework and schema, I guess, for that metadata. And I'll stop talking so that Max can showcase it.
Unfortunately, I'm not prepared for demo, so I posted the link to the chat so you can see that on your own screen. Yeah, you are correct. Basically, it's one YAML file per extension. I suggested some fields, some like should have fields, some nice to have fields. And as you noted, you are absolutely correct. This it's not possible to automate that fully, because if you know, for example, a repository link that contains some extension, you won't be able to automatically figure out what is the PyPy package name, or it might be hard to figure this out. You have to parse a lot of stuff. So I adapted the PyPy discovery script that Pedro made. Okay, thank you. So this is a proposal. So basically package name, repository, title, and some description that can be parsed from PyPy. The rest is optional. The main one of the interesting fields is official equals true to mark the extensions that are maintained by salt core team, and some metadata that can be parsed from PyPy package description automatically. And to be considered, that's like some ideas, not critical, absolutely not critical. And I think the main interesting part of this repo is the PyPy parser script. You can check it out. You have to, query PyPy. So basically, when the script was used to update extensions.cellproject.io static site, but the site hasn't been updated for like a couple of years. And when I asked Pedro why this happens, he told me that basically a GitHub action times out. It runs for 6 or 7 hours and it times out. So I added some arguments that will allow you to run it in batches. So it's about 500,000 packages on PyPy, and you can process like 10,000 or 100,000 at once, and it will eventually converge as soon as you keep the CI cache, GitHub cache between the runs. And then it creates a directory. I think I forgot, 2 weeks has passed. I forgot what's the data storage. I think it's picklet. One file per extension it finds. And also it has 2 lists, include and exclude, for manually adding or blocking extensions that are known to be salt extensions but don't conform to saltx.something name, and some extensions that can have saltx in its name but actually not a salt extensions. And so this can be used as a first automation layer to periodically scan PyPy for new extension and prepare either pull request or something else for a human to review and add some fields, maybe manually. The trickiest part of this metadata format is that it's not possible to have a single source of truth. Some fields can be trusted if you know if the primary source is GitHub repo or GitLab repo. But if the primary source is PyPy, you can't rely on PyPy repo link to be authoritative, because any person can specify an arbitrary repository and even mimic it as a core extension. So some fields have to be reviewed by a person.
Yeah.
So if this sounds interesting, I can come up with like the second script that is not implemented yet, that will generate some metadata based on PyPy, based on extensions found on PyPy.
So I think one of the things that might be helpful as far as
oh, sorry, and I forgot to say, basically later on the use cases I listed the use cases, but basically I'm not sure, you mentioned that you already implemented some discovery mechanism. Does it use this script or it's something else?
So what we demoed last time was really focusing on how do we pull in community extensions that live in the salt extensions org. And so that's the current discovery mechanism that we have. We can certainly extend that in order to pull in like another known good location, like the salt stack org, so that when things pop up there that start with saltext, we can go inspect them and pull in information and things like that. So I think having the metadata files distributed for those concepts. Like if the repository that we scanned has a metadata YAML file, then we can integrate that information, like where are the docs and things like that. What's the description of this? And the concept of categorization of where those extensions live, that I think we touched on a little bit last time, I think could be helpful here, right? So like you have different levels of trust. And so if we properly categorize things in the documentation such that we're like, hey, here's the core, here's the core extensions, and we link out to their documentation. Here's the community extensions, and there's oversight inside of the SALT extensions community. And there's eyes on it. We're creating those repositories for folks and checking things out before they're published and whatnot. I think that we're sort of running down a list of trust, and then we could potentially create another category where we integrate like other things that we found via PyPy, so that it's almost like a self-creating awesome list, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think that as long as we're clear with the fact that like, hey, we're about to link out to something that like we haven't really vetted, we just sort of discovered it, and we have that concept of like here's the main places, but oh, there's these other things, and if you find utility there, like go nuts, but you're kind of on your own. I think that integrating all of these strategies together could be really valuable.
Okay, okay. So if we decide to move forward with this metadata idea, my suggestion would be to put all the parsers that scan some sources for new extension into this repo. And the end result can be like, for example, if you decide to be more cautious about what we publish, the end result would be of a new extension that is discovered can be a pull request, automated one, but it has to be reviewed by a person, and it will contain already pre-populated metadata fields, and a person can add something or put some field that marks it as a okay, this was populated manually, don't touch it, don't update it anymore, and stuff like that. And then from this single source of metadata information, like a site publisher documentation index can pull these YAML files and loop over them and rely on them to populate the index site.
Piggybacking off of what Nick was talking about with trust and validation and things like that. I worry it will take us on a tangent, but if we want to, we could talk about it now. I think it would be good to unpack, like, is there anything in the metadata? Like, I'm trying to think of how we can show that that extensions that have gone through a more rigorous process to like be considered valid and trusted, and to prove that they're being actively maintained. I'm wondering if that gets captured in the metadata, or somehow like maybe there's some sort of validation certificate process or something like that, or if that's a separate issue. So am I leading us on a tangent? Because that was the immediate thing I thought of too, because how does a community member know that this is a trusted extension, or that we trust it, or that people have tested it and know that it works, and things like that?
Yes, that was my primary concern when I proposed this format, and maybe the reason why it's a bit more complicated than initially can be imagined. So the main field is origin. So origin means where this extension was discovered. And the origin can be manual if it was created by a human, like, for example, some repo that is not scanned on some exotic Git hosting provider. that we don't have automatic discovery robot running. And so we can add manually, and this means that no automation will update it. It only can be updated by a person. So the second type of origin is GitHub. We can scan the official community repos. We can scan Broadcom repos organization for new extensions that can form. And this means that this metadata can be periodically updated automatically, or some fields can be updated automatically. Not everything, but some of them, like, for example, optional fields like last commit, last release, that can serve as a proxy on how well the extension is maintained. Was it updated recently, like number of issues? Like there is a lot of metadata that is available through GitHub API. And the third one is basically GitLab. And we can add as many origins as we want. And the update mechanism will trust some of the metadata based on the origin. And the second reason why this field is important, because creating this metadata is one-off process, but there is also need to update something, because new releases get pushed, repos get disappear, documentation links might change, and some of this information can be updated automatically. And so we can rely on these scripts to periodically check whether there is something new, and some logic has to be implemented to decide what can be trusted and what is not.
So I think that the more I'm sort of thinking about the setup, the more I'm thinking that there's a possibility of this metadata schema being, I don't know, like pieces of it living in different places potentially. So like from my perspective, based upon the centralized documentation POC that we saw last time, we have a central spot that is looking at the salt extensions org in GitHub. And so we know that's like a good spot to look for extensions, and we scan through it real quick and we build documentation links if we don't currently have them in the list already. Now, the biggest problem with that was that like we don't really know very much about the extension other than like we found an extension in a repository, right? And so the metadata in that case was something that was to be distributed amongst the different salt extension repositories so that somebody who's managing that can have the metadata file in there that we can pull out while we're doing our scan, and we can get some additional information. So like what's the long description, what's the documentation link, because we can't like necessarily derive that unless we're like, okay, it should be on read the docs, and hopefully it's, you know, whatever the extension name is, .readthedocs.io or whatever. But what if it isn't? You know, so like we could potentially be creating these broken links out. So we want to make sure that things are proper and we can get some more information. So I think that some amount of metadata makes sense to live in the repositories themselves so that, you know, there's information that we expect when we scan them. I think there's still a lot of value in tracking other parts of it that seem more interesting from a centralized metadata perspective, right? Like knowing where we discovered this from, like having that origin field centrally is definitely important. So, you know, like if somebody manually added this stuff in, you know, a static link to the salt core docs or something like that, that like we don't need to go scan something, we know where it's going to be all the time. You know, that would be, you know, potentially one origin that would be manual or static. If we implement the PyPy searching, and that package isn't already covered in our list that we grabbed from like the community extensions location or the core extensions, then we would enter it into that PyPy section of the documentation where it lists out all of that stuff, and tracking and saving where we found this from, I think has value. So I think some combination of centralized metadata, and distributed metadata that gets combined when we build our centralized docs, could be a pretty good end state, because the centralized metadata would be more or less automatically created, right, when it's discovered. The distributed metadata would be created when the extension framework is created, right? Like we created a repository, it's going to be for netbox stuff or whatever. The copier template throws this metadata file in there. It asks you some questions like, hey, give me a description for this thing. People can flesh that out if they don't like what the description is at some point. And it sort of becomes like the semi-manual distributed information that gets integrated in the automatic ones. Does that sound fair?
To be honest, I haven't considered distributed metadata at all. My plan was to rely on existing PyPy metadata. PyPy has quite extensive number of fields, and salt extensions already, I think, rely on some keywords on PyPy to discover the existing scripts that Pedro made. I think it's, or the site, I don't remember exactly. I think it can grab some PyPy classifications fields automatically. And my idea was to rely on existing metadata. So whether it's PyPy fields, whether it's repository API, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that extension of authors can be relied on populating that properly.
I think that's probably fair. And there's probably some stuff that's already in like pyproject.toml, realistically. That
yes, and descriptions and some metadata, it's already exists, and I don't think it's worth reinventing another layer.
I think the thing that I'm mainly concerned about using only PyPy is that, like, I don't feel like we get the same level of trust that we do when we scan it through there, because essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it would scan PyPy and find things that are salt extensions through some mechanism, and we could see metadata about the project, but like the package homepage that points to a Git repository or something like that, that field is something that's gathered from like your setup config or your PyPy, a pyproject.toml or something, and it's a manual entry field, right? So somebody could create a PyPy project, published project, that points to something that isn't real, and then all of a sudden we're integrating into the documentation as like, oh, this is a legit community extension, but it doesn't necessarily reside in that org, right? Like that's a loophole that somebody could use in order to get something into the documentation links.
Yes, and this is explicitly prevented by the origin field. So if the origin is PyPy, only the PyPy metadata can be trusted, and we can also gate the submission process. Like the automation is only to help a human to discover what's new, without looking manually. But then the end result would be a pull request. And the person can check whatever needs to be checked and even mark it as a manually added entry.
So, sorry, didn't mean to cough into the mic. Sorry, just happened to cough. So like this parser would basically go into PyPy, find anything that's a salt extension, but there would still be a manual intervention where it just kind of like tells you what's available, but some human still needs to look at it and then open a pull request to integrate it.
Yeah, that's the idea.
So the central docs workflow that we currently have that Megan created, it goes through the community extensions repository, finds stuff that's not already in the docs and adds it. But it creates a pull request for you, and so it's just waiting for somebody to look at it, approve it, merge it. So we could have a similar process for things that are discovered in PyPy. I guess I'm struggling to. I want to try and automate as much as possible because realistically, I know that I have not enough time to do all the things, right? So like I want to try and lessen the burden on
What do you
the
mean, Nick? I don't know what you're talking about.
I want to try and lessen the burden on the community who's trying to keep up with all this stuff, right? So like if we have some PRs that come in and just need to be scanned over real quick and approved and merged, like that's one thing, but having a process where I need to vet something and potentially change that PR to, you know, either from PyPy to manual entry or something like that because I've added things or I've vetted it or whatever. And I am certain that this is a proper community extension. Yeah, that's a larger lift, right? And there might not be the volume in the long run of extensions coming in that, you know, it's problematic, but I feel like at least in the near future where there's potentially a lot of new extensions coming online, it could become overwhelming, at least for me. So I I'd prefer something where we kind of understood with more fidelity the trust level of a given extension. And I feel like the combination of PyPy and scanning the actual GitHub orgs could potentially get us there, because if we scan the orgs themselves, we have assurance that only the people who are allowed to create new repositories in that org have sort of gated entry of that and kept an eye on the publishing process and
Yeah, we
check
can
out
have different gating processes based on the source of the discovery source.
Yep.
So if it's a soul stack organization, it's definitely a core extension. It can be trusted. If it's a community extension, I think it's also can be trusted. If it's discovered on PyPy, it has to be reviewed, but also it might be combined or mutually excluded from, because everything that resides on GitHub also resides on PyPy, and there could be some conflicts because different spiders basically will discover the same extension twice on different sources.
Yeah,
So
there's
this is tricky. I agree.
yeah,
But this
yeah,
can be done, and I think it has to be. If we decide to go this way, it has to be done from something basic and simple.
yeah. I
And
definitely
then
don't
and
want
then
it
we
to
can
become
enrich.
too complex. I left my
What?
glasses in an office building, so I'm like,
Oh no. Well, have we reached an an agreement, or does this still need to be hashed out, or what do you two think?
So, we have the POC central documentation process right now. I think what Max has created is awesome and has overlap with it. And so some work needs to be done, possibly to do another POC of what that integration might look like, so that we can get the different scanning methods and trust level indicators worked out. I'll take that action. I'll probably delegate it. But I think that I can provide some guidance on it and maybe have some time to poke at it myself. So
Can you please share the link to your repo with the GitHub discovery automation?
that is not integrated yet, but it is sitting as a PR in the community repo in the Salt Extensions org.
Okay. Okay.
Is it the one called, there's two, MVP of central docs and templates, or is it both of those?
Probably.
Okay, no worries. I'll just. No worries. Well, we've got 15 minutes left. We could probably get some stuff done, but I'm also mindful that you've had a long week, Nick. And here's the funny thing. I just realized I misspelled on the agenda. I did it brainstorming initiatives. I will fix that, but I just thought it was funny. I made it.
I don't know. I kind of like it if you pronounce it like brainstorm mining.
Right. Oh, there you go. It's yeah, brainstorm mining. That's pretty good. It was totally intentional then.
Yeah, just leave it. You coined a new term.
Yep. I actually that could work, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so would we, because the way I kind of see like a good, and we could maybe table this for next time, but I kind of see it might be good to maybe look at an end-to-end workflow for extensions. Like we used to have at SaltStack long ago before VMware. We had I know you all know Mo, maybe. Mo used to have this thing called as is to be, where he would have us kind of map out flow charts of the way things are currently, and then kind of list all the friction points or the pain points in the current workflow, and then create a to be, like what would the golden path look like? What is the nice thing? And it might be a useful exercise for extensions to say, what's the end-to-end workflow for a maintainer of the extensions? What's the end-to-end workflow for somebody using extensions, and where are the current friction points, and which ones are the biggest ones that we maybe need to tackle? I don't know if that would be useful or, but it's just an idea. What does everybody think?
I really like the concept, and it doesn't surprise me because Mo's a smart guy. But I guess the main concern that I have about that is that like things are in a crazy amount of flux right now, and we don't quite know what we're doing yet. and so like the as is kind of like a dumpster fire, and mapping that out, like obviously, yeah, we're trying to make it better, and I don't know if knowing the current state is helpful with that or not.
That's fair.
But
I mean, then I think the most important thing is, what's the biggest pain point? Why can't we even get to stability? What's causing the chaos? What's causing the difficulty right now? I think that could be a good place to start, maybe then.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest pain point is the necessity of writing unit tests.
Amen.
Could see that.
And there is a lot of automation available in salt factories, but it's not documented, and it's hard to discover which help which test helpers are available, because I think only Pedro is familiar 100% on how it works.
That scares me a little bit. Okay, all right. I wonder if we could get that better documented. Yeah.
I'm not
Seems kind
sure
of
if
urgent.
it's stable. I'm not sure if it's stable, the test framework and the helpers. If it's stable, I think it can be documented as part of the developer documentation. But if it's not stable, there is no point in targeting the moving target.
That seems fair. Is this something where we have a dependency on the core team for help? Like it's not something we can resolve, we need the core team? Maybe. I think that's maybe a maybe, yeah.
So far, people seem to come to Slack or Discord community and ask questions on how do I test this thing, or how do I test that thing. But I think something better can be envisioned in future.
I mean, Wayne used to run the test clinics, but I don't think they were that well viewed. I mean, I used to watch them pretty regularly, but still, it's hard if you're not used to unit testing. It's hard. And I don't know that there's a better mechanism than either than the Discord. Although I found, the new Discord seems to be a lot quieter. Maybe it's just a perception issue on my part, but it seems to be a lot quieter than Slack. I'm not sure, everyone survived the transition. Either that or the Salt team is just more stretched because of the headcount reductions, and so it's just there's less interaction from the Salt core team there as well.
I think you're right, at least in that my perception mirrors yours and that it's quieter. But the one thing that I have noticed, like somewhat really recently, was that Stack Overflow and Reddit seem to have picked up.
Well, that's probably partly due to the fact that there's an integration with Discord to the Stack Overflow, and the Reddit. Like I think there's channels in Discord for there's some feeds in Discord for both Reddit, Stack Overflow, YouTube, GitHub discussions. Maybe like I hadn't really used Stack Overflow much for Salt because I found much of it very dated. But maybe people are picking up because they've lost the Slack and not made the transition, or because they've seen the integrations in Discord. I'm not sure what the answer is, but yeah, definitely Discord seems a lot quieter than Slack used to be, and I don't think everyone has made the transition.
Yeah, I was monitoring those before Discord, so my perception again is that those picked up a little bit, especially recently. Again, no idea of what the cause is, but it feels like it could be due to the fact that Slack went away, and I know some folks can't use Discord in certain scenarios, right? So it's a little bit of a pain point, in corporate environments that are blocking, a gaming app. It's a little difficult sometimes to get that answer that you need while you're at work, and maybe they're turning to Reddit or Stack Overflow because of that. Maybe they just didn't know about the transition. I'm not sure what the answer is. Yeah, Max, I think it was the last open hour we were talking about the IRC bridge, and yeah, that's dead. They're not bringing it back.
Yeah, every day I see 3 or 4 new people pop into Discord. So they're still trickling in.
Yeah. So we'll see where it levels out at, I guess. I'm not going to be able to attend open hour today. So if anybody is attending and wants to bring that up for comment, I think it would be an interesting thing to get to the bottom of, but I'm not sure that we will.
I'm just not sure that there's even we get to the bottom of it, I'm not sure that there's anything that can be done about it, right? Like,
That's fair. Maybe it's a gravity problem. That's my word for problems that it's just gravity. You can't change it, you know? Yeah, it's all good. Okay. I mean, this is really interesting thing about the unit testing. I would be interested in exploring that problem in more depth if any of you want to keep the conversation going on Discord, or we could add it as an agenda item for next time if we, but it seems almost larger than salt extensions. And am I right about that?
oh, absolutely. It's probably the #1 impediment to PRs in salt in general, right?
There's
Yeah.
like the normal testing is hard stuff, but then there's also the fact that there's a lot of magic that goes into, especially when you start to get into like functional or integration tests, right? Like all the salt factories stuff. You know, it's pretty magical, and if you're unaware of it or how to use it, it's a steep climb.
Be arcane, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
like,
know how that stuff works.
I can tell you, like, I have you know, a bunch of basically patches to our own salt you know, salt code base that we haven't pushed upstream just because I don't have the time to sit there and hammer out tests and for everything, and it's probably the #1 impediment for me for contributing new code to salt or contributing fixes is, and the testing requirements have been ramped up. Like the only possible kind of solution I could see to kind of turn the tide is like if, you know, a group of community members or something steps up and decides like they're going to help write tests for people's submissions. Like, I know that's kind of probably in the
Kind of what
opposite.
Wayne did. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, even kind of further than Wayne did, like
Mm.
actually, Wayne, yeah, I mean, Wayne did kind of help show you, like, got you at least started. But yeah, like it might just come to like you get find and I don't even know if the community is robust enough anymore, or big enough that like people would be willing to just sit there and crank out tests for PRs.
Well, we have
Just
GPT now. I think it can just do it, right? So,
Yeah.
just use
And now we are free to release new salt extensions completely without unit tests.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short, but just to make a joke. Sorry, Gary.
no, that was perfect. Yeah, just I guess the short answer is I don't know what the right answer is, but I just from my view, I can tell you that the and I completely understand why it exists, but you know, the testing requirements have ramped up, right, for at least contributions for the salt code base, and the number of resources have gone down, and we have a bit of a dichotomy there, right? Like,
Yeah. I feel your pain. I hear it and I feel it. I really do. So, yeah. Okay. I'll at least take it back to the team and mention it. I don't know what the solutions are, but I'll at least mention it. So, yeah. Good stuff. Okay. Well, everybody, I guess, give some thought about like how do we decide what to work on first? How do we pick what are some of the most important things for this group to work on? Like what can we do, I guess, as a working group with the scope that we have. Yeah, give it some thought.
Yeah, I think, first blush is going to be firming up the frameworks and helpers that
Yeah.
enable people to both discover and create extensions. And then the other thrust is going to be, hey, we have this big list of stuff that's getting ripped out. We need to create extensions for a lot of this stuff. Even if it's just for, as a courtesy to folks who might be like a 1Z, 2Z type of deal without the development resources to be able to continue to support it themselves. We should at least like have the code accessible in some form, even though it might just sit there and age and never advance.
Are there some plans to create some tracking project board for
I'm sorry?
the migration? Are there some plans to create a project board?
There is currently a
Right.
project board in the Salt Extensions org. One of the things that I mentioned in the beginning of this session was that I might try to take a look at that pretty soon now that the Great Module migration has been finalized to see how up to date it is. But there is a project board with some amount of issues that that can be looked at currently. It just may or may not be completely up to date.
I just dropped it in case you want the link. Good stuff. Oh, we have a big mountain to climb, don't we?
Yep, but you know, we're at the end of our hour and Shane needs time to tell a quick joke, so here we are.
I haven't paid attention because I've been, scanning for jokes. Well, that was my joke. No, I'm just kidding. Now, see, what's the difference between a vegan and a computer programmer? One is disgusted by a rack of lamb. The other is disgusted by a lack of RAM.
That's fine.
Good one.
I like it.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and join the open hour later, and then we'll see you here in about 2 weeks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
See you. Bye bye.